and welcome. My name is Ken Muraguri. I'm a GMAT trainer with the Kenya program. Today, we'll be going through parallelism and a sentence correction. So, what is parallelism? So, parallelism occurs when a sentence contains a group, that is two or more words or phrases that are similar in meaning, construction, and grammar. So, when this sentence has some words, usually verbs, that is any part of a speech actually, because usually we find verbs under parallelism, but they can be nouns, they can be prepositions and so on, but they are in a list or related to each other. So you have to check to make sure that the words are constructed in the same way. That is infinitive, using to and a base form of a verb, gerund, which is a noun that is using ing, and noun or a pronoun. So tenses can come into play, but they have more to do with meaning than parallelism. This means that under parallelism, you can find different tenses. It's not a must that if it's past, all of it is past. You can have past, present, future, as long as the meaning is okay. So please take note of that. So before starting your process of elimination based on parallelism, we check for other grammatical errors, that is subject-verb agreement, pronoun errors, modifiers, comparisons, etc. So you'll find that parallelism is more about the construction of the sentence, and that's why it's actually one of the major errors that you'll find under sentence correction. So parallelism is always introduced by a marker, usually and or. So and is the most common parallelism marker, then followed by or, and then there are some other ones that are not so common, like not only, but also, either, or. But these are not so common for testing parallelism. So the most common one that you'll find is and. So we have an example here. So I will go to the city to buy groceries, shop for clothes, and visit the park. So the first thing that you should notice here is the and here. And once you see an and, you will know that there's a form or some form of a list in that sentence. So that list is whatever I went to buy. So I went to buy groceries, then shop for clothes, and visit the park. So you find that to be parallel, these have to be the same. And usually you'll see here there's a verb. So visit the park, there's a verb here, and then there's another verb. So once you break down this sentence, you can say I will go to the city to buy groceries, or I will go to the city to shop for clothes, or I will go to the city to visit the park. So since all these are preceded by a verb, so that parallelism construction is okay. And then the second here, Ben called John, James, and Peter for the meeting. So you can see here we have a noun, we have another noun. So meaning-wise, it's okay because you can say Ben called John for the meeting, or Ben called James for the meeting, Ben called Peter for the meeting. So it's not a must that whatever is in the list should be verbs or should be starting with the verb. Even nouns or other parts of speech can be used to construct a parallel sentence. So how do we approach these parallelism problems in sentence correction? So first of all, we will identify the marker. So we've said the marker is and, or, and so on, but the most common is and. Then identify the part of speech that immediately follows the marker. So once you see maybe the marker is an or, this part of speech that follows the or, identify which is it? Is it a noun? Is it a pronoun? Is it a verb? Is it a preposition? What is it? So once you identify that, check to make sure that the items in the list are similar to the item after the marker. So if you find, say, it's a noun, make sure that whatever list is here is also a noun. Then once parallelism is verified, so you've verified that these two are similar, identify the sentence stem and individually try out all the items to make sure that the meaning is sound. So this means that you break it apart so that it's not a list anymore, it's just one item, and then construct a sentence using that one item in the stem. If the meaning is sound, this is number 5. If the meaning is okay, we have our correctly constructed parallel sentence. So we'll go over these step by step so that we can really grasp what's going on here. So we have our first step here is identify the marker. So we have a sentence: the government helps the citizens by building roads, protecting the borders, and by subsidizing essential goods and commodities. So the first thing you should do is identify the marker. And for our case, it's and. Then you go to the next step, which is identify the part of speech that follows our marker. So you have here our marker. Then we have a part of speech that follows, which is a preposition. So once you know that, you can move on to the third step. The third step is identify the list items part of speech. So as you may have noticed, we have 3 items in this list. So there is this first one, second one, and the third one. So all these items should all begin using a preposition. So if we go back, we can see that the second item here, this is a verb. It's not a preposition. And here we do have a preposition. So since it's not preposition, and preposition, we can already tell that this sentence is not parallel. So number 4 is test soundness. So this number 4 comes after you have identified if the sentence is parallel or not. So this only comes if the sentence is parallel. If it's not parallel, there's no need of going on to this 4th step. So like our previous sentence, it wasn't parallel, so you wouldn't reach to this step. But now here we have 2 examples. So going over our strategy, notice the and, then notice the part of speech of the following word. So this is a verb. We have subsidizing essential goods. Then the other one is protecting and building. So notice that this verb is and all the rest are also participle. So the form of the verb used. So that means that this sentence now is parallel. So once parallel, you test the soundness using the stem and the list item, so individually. So identify your stem. So I've bolded here the stem of our sentence. So the government helps the citizens by. So the first item is building roads. So you can hear that makes perfect sense. And then the government helps the citizens by protecting the borders, also okay. The government helps the citizens by subsidizing essential goods and commodities, also okay. So you have tested the soundness of this parallel sentence, and it's okay. The second one, the government helps the citizens by building roads, by protecting the borders, and by subsidizing essential goods. So here you have your marker, you have your preposition, and then you have prepositions starting all the lists. So we have by and by. So when testing such a sentence, so the stem now changes, it doesn't include this preposition because each item list has its own preposition. So the government helps the citizens So by building roads, so that's okay. The government helps the citizens by protecting the borders. The government helps the citizens by subsidizing essential goods and commodities. So this also is parallel and the meaning is sound. But of course in GMAT, remember we look at grammar. So in this case, we are looking at parallelism. Then we look at meaning. In this case, it's okay. Then finally, we look at conciseness. So comparing this sentence, the first one and the second one, when looking at conciseness, you'll find that the second one is very repetitive: by building, by protecting, and by subsidizing. So if by any chance you had the choice of either the first sentence or the second sentence, and both are sound meaning-wise, you would go for the first. But be careful, because most of the sentences that use a preposition like by, you may find that it's a different list, such that the government helps the citizens by building roads. And then you find that now there's kind of another change of thought that signifies that the other second item list does not fall under helping the citizens or how the government helps the citizens. So you should just be careful, and of course you will be helped along by this step, breaking down the sentence. And we'll see that as we move on. Then once now you decide that this sentence is parallel, you go on to the fifth step, which is meaning. So if the meaning of all the individual mini sentences consisting of the stem and one item list each is sound, the parallel construction is okay. If the meaning is not sound, we have a meaning error and can eliminate the answer choice. So this is usually the last check. So you have checked that the individual sentences are okay. So if the meaning is okay, but the parallel construction is okay, as we have done in the last example. If the meaning is not sound, you have a meaning error, which is a serious error, so you can eliminate that answer choice. So what should we watch out for when dealing with parallelism? So number one, be careful not to use sound in your decision making. So oftentimes an answer may sound weird in GMAT, but it can be grammatically correct. So do not lean towards whatever answer that sounds good. Just use the steps that we have used, break it down, and then you can decide if it's parallel or not. So do not use sound. Then use the entirety of the sentence to your advantage, especially in meaning and sentence stem extraction. So of course, to be able to effectively do all the steps, you need to know what the stem of the sentence is. You need to know which are the items in the list. So to determine that, you'll probably need the whole of the sentence and not just the underlined part. So study the sentence so that you can be able to extract the stem and also understand the meaning of what the sentence is trying to tell us. So number three, lists within lists, or two independent lists in a sentence. So sometimes you can find that there's an item list, so it consists of three items. So item 1, item 2, and item 3. And then you find that item 2 has a list of its own. So it has item A and item B. So be careful of these. You can find that in this instance, if you have a verb here, the verb that's needed, it's here, not in this small or sub list. And then another verb here. So verb, verb, verb. So be careful of this list within list. And to help you with that, use comma placements as a guide. Because if, say, there is only 2 items here, and the super list is 3 items, if you find a comma here and you'll know that this refers to the huge list. But if there are 2 items here, and you have, say, A and B, since you won't have a comma, you'll know that this is a sublist. So these are the items that you should watch out for. And with that said, you can handle an example. So as we usually do, just go on and pause the video, try out the question on your own. And then once you're done, just unpause it and we'll walk through the question together.
You're watching Success with Bob Mwiti Show, presented to you by Upstack America. Upstack America is a consulting company that helps immigrants find amazing higher education and job opportunities in the tech industry in the United States. You can find our programs by going to www.upstackamerica.com. Upstack America, we wake you up to the unlimited potential within you.
Okay, so we have, after weeks of uncertainty about the course the country would pursue to stabilize its troubled economy, officials reached a revised agreement with the International Monetary Fund, pledging the enforcement of substantially greater budget discipline as that which was originally promised, and to keep inflation below 10%. So we have our options. So of course we have a list here, and as we said, you determine where the marker is. So in option A, we have our marker, and then what's immediately following the marker? It's to keep. So to keep is a verb in its infinitive form. So we go back and see the other part of that list. So this is one part, and then the other part is here. So pledging, the enforcement. So it can be that this list is starting at pledging, or it can start at the enforcement. To know that, you can try to understand the meaning of the sentence. So this sentence says, these officials, they reached a revised agreement with the International Monetary Fund. So what was this agreement? So they pledged the enforcement of substantially greater budget discipline and to keep inflation below 10%. So these are the things that they agreed to. So you can see, if you consider pledging, this is a participle. So it's a verb, yes, but it's participle. So that means that this is not parallel. And even if you consider that this list is starting here, they pledged the enforcement and to keep inflation below. The enforcement is a noun, so that definitely is in parallel, so we can eliminate A. And then B, you have and, then you have keeping, which is a verb. And then we have pledging, which is also a verb, and it's past participle. So again, that's assuming that this list is starting over here. So since we have now our parallel structure, we can look at the meaning, because that's now the next step. So these officials, they reached a revised agreement pledging the enforcement of substantially greater budget discipline and keeping inflation below the 10% figure. So this agreement is keeping inflation below the 10% figure. That can't be an agreement, because the agreement should be to keep inflation, or that they would keep inflation below the 10% figure. So this means that they agreed to, like, it doesn't really make any sense. So meaning-wise, this is flawed. This is the second part. So we can eliminate B. C, we have our marker. We have our infinitive verb. So this is verb, infinitive. And then we have here to enforce, another infinitive. So we have our parallelism. So the next thing is check the meaning. Break up this list into individual items and then check the meaning. So officials reached a revised agreement with the International Monetary Fund, pledging. So the list now becomes what these officials pledged to. So pledging to enforce substantially greater budget discipline than originally promised, and pledging to keep inflation below 10%. So that makes perfect sense. So we can keep C. We go to D. We have our marker and we have keeping, which is the verb. So it's a participle verb. And the other list we have infinitive form of the verb. So since that is not similar, you do not have parallelism in that, so you can eliminate D. Then you can of course consider the meaning which will be similar to our B, keeping inflation below the 10% as an agreement. So that doesn't really make sense. And then E, you have your infinitive and you have other infinitive to enforce. So meaning wise, so pledging to enforce substantially greater budget discipline as that which was originally promised, that's okay. And pledging to keep inflation less than 10%, that's also okay. So you have two choices here. So you have choice, so you have eliminated A, B, and D. So we have C and E. So now we have to go deeper because both are parallel, both are okay meaning-wise. So what's the difference between these two? For E, it's budget discipline as that which was originally promised and to keep inflation less than 10%. Then C has budget discipline than originally promised and to keep inflation below 10%. So we could argue over below versus less, but that's not as important as this other part, because in as much as this is okay, it's less concise than this one. There's no real reason for using this wording, which makes the construction itself weird as compared to this. So for that simple reason, because C is more concise than E, you can eliminate E and pick C as your answer. So here's our answer for that. And I hope you were following, because this example is very important in terms of determining the meaning and using conciseness to eliminate your last error so that you remain with just one single, concise, grammatically correct, and parallel option. So we'll do another example. So go ahead and pause, do it yourself, and then you can unpause and we'll continue. So we have where larger banks can afford to maintain their own data processing operations, many smaller regional and community banks are finding that the cost associated with upgrading data processing equipment and with the development and maintenance of new products and technical staff are prohibitive. Okay, so we have our answer choice A, cost associated with. So realize that we have a lot of lists here. So we have many smaller regional and community banks. So that's our subject. Are finding that the cost associated with upgrading data processing equipment. So that's list number one. And with the development and maintenance of new products and technical staff are prohibitive. So this is our main list, number one, and the development and maintenance of new products and technical staff. So we are developing and maintaining new products and technical stuff. So all these is our item number 2. Okay, so since we now know what our main lists are, you now identify your and, which we'll be using, which is this. So what comes after and? You have with here. So with the development, so associated, the cost associated with the development and maintenance of new products. And then the first item list, cost associated with upgrading data processing equipment. We have our stem is from while to cost associated, then from here. So if for our option A, you can see that you have a width there and a width there, which is okay. So A and B are okay, parallelism wise. Then if you look at C, cost arising from upgrading data processing equipment and width. So you have a width there, and then you have a from for our item list number 1. So for that reason, this is not parallel, can eliminate C. D, cost of upgrading data processing equipment and width. So we have a width and an off. So that's of course not parallel. Same thing with E. So we have 2 choices left here, and the only difference is this one is cost, this one is cost. So for now, we do not know which one is right, but in these cases, GMAT always gives a hint, because since we have identified our stem, you can now look beyond the underlined part to know which is the correct one. So you can see this part is not underlined. So the cost associated, so if you say the cost associated with these and these are prohibited, because this one now is plural and you need subject, verb, agreement. So you know that whatever subject should be plural. So for that reason, you can straight away eliminate cost. So that leaves option B as our answer, because now the sentence becomes that the costs associated with upgrading data processing equipment and development and maintenance are prohibited. So what is prohibited? These costs. So for that reason, found our answer B. So we used parallelism to eliminate 3 of the answer choices, and then we used subject-verb agreement to eliminate our last answer choice, so that we remain with our correct answer. Okay, so here is our answer. In summary, what we have said is 1, when you're dealing with parallelism, identify the marker. 2, identify the part of speech immediately after the marker. So part of speech. Number 3, check if the part of speech beginning each list is similar to this specific part of speech. So check for similarity. Then number 4, break up the sentence. So combine the stem with each item on its own. So doing this, such if the meaning is conserved. If the meaning for all item list plus the stem is okay, you found that you have your parallel sentence with sound meaning. And following these steps, you'll be able to easily construct sentences while using parallelism, and it will help you in your eliminations. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye.
You've been watching Success with Bob Mwiti Show, brought to you by Upstack America. Come back next time to hear more steps and missteps that I took on the path to becoming a successful immigrant in USA. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and also follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn.